A marker here, the birthplace of China's infant democracy movement. Several weeks ago, before the killing and while the student protest movement was at its peak, we dispatched a number of Chinese-speaking specialists, journalists, and academics to come here and piece together the background of the story. Much of what they and we have learned has never been reported before. The goddess of democracy, for example. If all had gone according to plan, the students would have left Tiananmen days before the shooting began. She would have been their surrogate, their symbol in an empty square. We will tell you of a clandestine meeting in, of all places, a Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurant at the edge of Tiananmen, where a demoralized student leader sought help in planning an escape before the massacre. And we'll report on the state secret revealed publicly by the Secretary General of the Chinese Communist Party in the presence of the General Secretary of the Soviet Communist Party. We'll tell you why and how it may have sealed his fate and that of the students in Tiananmen. This is a story about young dreams and old rivalries, of a battle for power that is still underway, of a single chapter in this nation's long history.
This is the Koppel Report.
We hold this truth to be self-evident that all man is created equal. The government should be for the people, by the people, and of the people.
Tragedy at Tiananmen, the untold story.
It's an amazing line of them, but I mean, at this point, it's nothing sinister. I mean, these guys look like they're out, jogging down the street.
Perhaps it was the Chinese government's last effort to resolve things peacefully. More likely, they were inviting one more public humiliation. A final pretext before they sent in the tanks. The government dispatched 5,000 soldiers, ran them in. Some had jogged 10, even 12 miles. Most of them were without weapons. There may have been a few officers. In any event, there was no leadership. The demonstrators at Tiananmen taunted the soldiers, shoved at them, pulled at them, not so much offering food as jamming it in their faces. Student leaders lectured the demoralized young troops on their duty to serve the people. If the soldiers' mission had been to clear the square, the mission was a fiasco. The night of June 2nd gave way to the dawn of June 3rd. Exhausted soldiers and exhausted demonstrators lay sprawled around Tiananmen Square, which had now been occupied for 7 weeks. The student demonstrators had been remarkably well organized. It was the government that seemed in disarray. For a few more hours, the symbols of the government, the army, and the students coexisted in relative harmony. That night, it would come to an end. Eyewitnesses to what happened at Tiananmen that night are 4 of our Chinese-speaking specialists.
About 10 o'clock on the night of 3rd June, a Saturday in Beijing, I drove from the east of the city into close to Tiananmen Square and parked my car on the eastern side.
The first thing I heard on the radio was this instruction: no one should go into the streets, especially no one should go to Tiananmen Square. So I went straight to Tiananmen Square.
Just thinking to myself, this is a dream. This is so unreal. I could not believe what was going on. And then I told people around there that we were going to go to the square, and they all thought I was crazy. But I said to the pedicab driver, let's go.
So we said, well, maybe if we stay by Mao's portrait, it will be safe. Maybe if we stay by the marble bridges, it would be safe. Well, if we hide behind those trees, certainly wouldn't be any. None of us imagined that it would be raining bullets an hour later. A little bit after 12 o'clock, an armed personnel carrier came roaring through the crowd. People were just lucky to get out of its way, I found myself, almost before I realized what was happening, carrying a huge barrier with 50 other people and putting that in a north-south direction across the boulevard. When the APC came back on their second sweep, it was caught, the wheels of it were caught in this barrier that was erected by the crowd, including myself. It was just madness. Everyone just ran with almost exuberation, enthusiasm that people with their bare hands had stopped the tank. What happened next was very ugly, and I would have to stress this, to the best of my knowledge, this was not done with the approval or with the participation of any students. But the tank was surrounded, smashed with iron poles, the little glass windows in it were broken in, and then clothing and matting and stuff were thrown on the top, and kerosene and Molotov cocktails were thrown on. And what I heard people saying in the crowd is, it's okay, he's not a human being, it's a thing. That driver of the tank is not a person, he deserves to be killed. At least one of the guys, I think, was killed, and some of the others were escaped. With students, got the injured drivers of the APC, actually, it's not a tank, onto a bus, got them into an ambulance.
Shortly after, I could see an armoured personnel carrier moving into the Xidan intersection from Tiananmen Square in the east. This armoured personnel carrier was one of two that had got disconnected from the main body of armoury moving in another army manoeuvre from the east. A Molotov cocktail had been placed on the top of the APC and it was burning. And the people had surrounded this APC, waiting for the soldiers to get out. The crowd was howling, screaming for him to get out, but waiting, knowing that the APC was burning and that he had to come out. Maybe 10 minutes later, the hatch came open again. The soldier jumped onto the front of the APC and then down. He got maybe 5 or 10 metres before the crowd just jumped on top of him. He was ripped limb from limb.
The gunfire was first heard to the west of the square. At least we could see little flashes of light, the tracer bullets going off above our heads.
The real killing came taking the road, taking Chang'an Road, starting from the west, moving towards the square. Some Chinese have now referred to this as Blood Road.
From where I was standing close to the eastern edge of Tiananmen Square, I could see people falling down right across the full panorama of Chang'an. There was one man standing maybe 10 or 20 metres from me. All I could see was that there was a hole hit him in the forehead, and he dropped to the ground, didn't move. One young girl who was carried, she was bleeding. She looked like a crimson patchwork to me. She didn't look like a human being.
Before I left the square for the last time, I went up to the Monument of the People's Heroes. Tightly serried ranks of students, grim-faced with their headbands. And one girl said to me, "Go home now." And I realized she meant, we are now ready to face death, and we don't want you to have to be part of that. Please go home. All this time there was a duet of the airwaves with the government saying Tiananmen is a sacred place, the students crying out their views of democracy and so on.
When they got to the eastern fringe of the square, soldiers, for no reason that I could perceive, started firing on people maybe 150 metres away who were standing in front of the Beijing Hotel. The soldiers just randomly cut loose, and I saw maybe 10 people fall down as a result of that gunfire. I could see maybe 3,000 or 4,000, I'm not sure how many students, who still gathered around the monument to the people's heroes. By about 2:30, the soldiers had completely surrounded three sides of the square.
At 4 o'clock, the lights went out. We thought that that was the worst moment had arrived and that some type of savage, fighting must be taking place, but we were too far away to see.
A colleague of mine who stayed in the square up to 6:30 a.m. said that this is what happened. One of the student leaders negotiated with the army command for the students to leave. The army agreed to them leaving, and they opened up a corridor toward the south, toward the Tiananmen gate, for the students to leave. My colleague tells me that the students joined hands, sang the Internationale and the Chinese national anthem, and made their way out towards the south.
A lot of journalists marched out with them. Where the killing then began again, and this is Spanish television crew who were on the scene and marched out with the students. What happened was they marched out at the southeast corner and then were led around, and then all of a sudden the tanks showed up again and closed off the road on them, a new group of tanks who didn't know who these people were and opened fire on them.
The students from Nankai University in Tianjin, who could not go home overnight like a lot of the Beijing students could, stayed on the square to the very end, and they supposedly lost several hundred people right on the square, including people being mowed over in tanks, because they voted not to leave.
I felt incredibly sad, and I felt very sad for China too, because I really think that this was an opportunity for China, and it's an opportunity that they've lost.
In one single evening, they wiped out every iota of hope or faith or idealism I ever had towards the Communist Party of China. They are totally bankrupt. They are totally lost. In my mind, and certainly in the mind of my Chinese friends, they have lost all legitimacy. They have lost the mandate of heaven.
And so, in one bloody night, the movement was crushed, order restored. But what had so scared China's leadership that they resorted to killing their own young? There was much more to it than just the demonstrations. We'll begin piecing the story together when tragedy at Tiananmen, the untold story, continues.
The Koppel Report, brought to you by Merrill Lynch, a financial firm built on a tradition of trust, and Kellogg's Product 19.
There are vitamins you take because you feel you have to, and vitamins you take because you want to. Vitamins can be flaky, bumpy, crispy, crunchy, and taste so good. It's Kellogg's Product 19 with 100% vitamin nutrition. The only high nutrition flake made with the wholesome goodness of 4 grains, including oats. Kellogg's Product 19. Flaky, bumpy, crispy, crunchy, tasty vitamins.
The finance ministers of the 7 most prosperous Western nations.
The world has become a global marketplace. Last year, Merrill Lynch helped corporations and governments raise $230 billion for building industries and creating opportunities. We're proud to have inspired that much trust. Merrill Lynch, a tradition of trust.
Wednesday, John Ritter gives a lesson in love.
You fool, you look wonderful.
You fool, you look wonderful.
What?
On an all-new Hooverman. Then.
You're really concerned with Ann, huh? Of course, I care about her. I care about everybody. I care about all living things.
The Robert Guillaume Show. And for some, it's a place to hide.
Be prepared.
For others, a place to find themselves.
You don't give up, do you?
China Beach after Hooverman and the Robert Guillaume Show Wednesday.
The Koppel Report continues.
All over China today, scenes like these. A student demonstrator in the hands of the law. But this is not today. These scenes are 2.5 years old, and so are these. Student demonstrations denouncing corruption, demanding free speech. They erupted all over China during the winter of '86-'87. And as we replay these all but forgotten scenes, there is a foreshadowing of things to come. April 15th, this year. Hu Yaobang, former head of the Chinese Communist Party, dies unexpectedly, and China's students go into mourning.
Hu Yaobang's death had galvanized them. As one of them put it to me, the wrong man died.
The movement that was smothered in 1987 catches fire again. Hu Yaobang had been close to the students, had tolerated their demonstrations, and for that he was fired from his post as head of the Communist Party, replaced as chosen successor to Deng Xiaoping. Mourning Hu Yaobang, therefore, is an indirect way of criticizing Deng Xiaoping. Thousands of students converge on Tiananmen Square the night before Hu Yaobang's funeral, fearful that they'll be barred from the square the following day. April 22nd, the day of the funeral. All the key players are there. The student's dead hero lies in state. China's paramount leader, Deng Xiaoping, said to be in semi-retirement. He is, after all, 84. His most recent hand-picked successor, Zhao Ziyang. Zhao is already in political trouble, but the student demonstrations offer him an opportunity, which he will seize. And China's Prime Minister, Li Peng. He is despised by the students, and there are now 50,000 of them in the square, calling Li's name, urging him to come out. Li Peng stays inside the Great Hall. Outside, 3 students are permitted to cross police lines bearing a petition. It calls, among other things, for freedom of speech and press and an end to China's rampant corruption and nepotism. Out there in the crowd is a 23-year-old woman, Chai Ling.
When our delegates knelt down and put this petition above their heads, all the students present cried.
Chai Ling is destined to become supreme commander of the students at Tiananmen. This interview was conducted secretly in late May by an American student.
No one came out to take the petition. From that day on, I started to work for the self-governing body of the students.
April 24th. The government and the students begin heading on a collision course. Deng Xiaoping is told that the students have begun a boycott of classes, that they have set up their own loudspeaker system on which they're broadcasting tapes from the Voice of America. As newly elected student leaders stage a massive rally on the campus of Beijing University, Deng orders a secret meeting of party elders for the next day. Fragments of that meeting are uncovered by Marlo Hood, another of our Chinese-speaking specialists.
The key date here is April 25th, which is when Deng Xiaoping made an internal speech to a small group of leaders and made 2 decisions. One, that the next day there should be what he called a forceful editorial characterizing the student demonstrations as turmoil, and that there should be a crackdown.
In the West, our attention is riveted on the students and the boldness of their demonstrations. But all of this is playing out against an internal rift that has been festering within the Chinese leadership for nearly a year. Deng Xiaoping is disenchanted with his own hand-picked successor. In fact, Zhao Ziyang, who is on a state visit to North Korea, has already been marked for dismissal from his post as General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. But there is mounting evidence now that associates of Zhao are in close touch with the demonstrators in the square. Deng is furious at the students and intensely suspicious of Zhao. April 26. The People's Daily editorial ordered by Deng is published. The students are expected to be terrified, to be described as unpatriotic in China, to be accused of inciting violence, are crimes punishable by death.
They assumed, I think, that when they had that editorial, Deng Xiaoping has spoken, the students will give up. The leader has spoken, the emperor has spoken, it's over. Didn't go that way.
The editorial appeared, enraged the students, in Beijing. The following day was the largest anti-government demonstration China had ever seen to date.
And there was this tangible feeling that this was a moment in history, that these students were going to defy the authority of the Communist Party and march out of the gates of the university to articulate a viewpoint that they believed in. Essentially, they knew from their parents, from the history of their country, that they were walking into possible prison terms, possible beating, possible execution.
Sometimes party secrets are leaked in the most extraordinary fashion here in China. In late May, an internal document, a speech delivered by State President Yang Shangkun to an emergency meeting of China's military commission, a full text of that speech is pasted on a lamppost outside the government compound here. It reveals for the first time what happened when Zhao Ziyang returned to Beijing from North Korea. He sides with the students. He criticizes the People's Daily editorial that so offended the students. For Deng Xiaoping, this is all the evidence he needs that Zhao is trying to use the student movement to seize power himself. May 4th, a big day for the Chinese government. More than 2,000 delegates from the Asian Development Bank are holding their convention in Beijing. It is a big day also for the students. The 70th anniversary of a movement that began at Beijing University and led to the founding of the Chinese Communist Party. The demonstrations that day are huge. Speaking to the Asian bankers the same afternoon, Zhao Ziyang makes his first public break with Deng Xiaoping.
He very clearly took a soft line on the students. He said that their demands were reasonable and that ways could be found to meet them.
How was that speech received in the inner circles of the government?
Deng Xiaoping was furious. He shortly after that made a comment which may sound mild to us, but within party circles is very strong indeed. He said that Zhao Ziyang in that speech was expressing his own personal point of view. Well, that effectively isolated Zhao.
For a few days, the students relish the success of their May 4th demonstration. They go back to their schools, return to their classes. But Deng has had enough.
So that while the people of Beijing were celebrating what they thought was some sort of breakthrough in their battle for democracy and press freedom, the top leadership of the country was out of the capital, rallying support of the military.
Between the 4th and 8th of May, Deng makes the first of 2 secret trips to Wuhan.
We believe that he left Beijing and went to central China to talk to the military commanders and actually round up the support that he was going to need to enact the type of measures that he'd outlined in the People's Daily editorial.
On the 10th of May, there is a massive bicycle procession, a parade of 10,000 into the city, and there begins to be discussion of a hunger strike. But only a few days away now is a major event that the students will use to full advantage. It was to be the crowning achievement of Deng Xiaoping's career. Instead, it will be a major humiliation, the state visit of Mikhail Gorbachev. That sequence of events, when tragedy at Tiananmen, the untold story, continues.
President Bush attacked the budget deficit tonight in a speech.
Inflation concerns swept Wall Street today as reports.
The Dow Jones average seesawed all day, closing up. The new administration's proposed budget puts less
Change,
emphasis on the
twists, turns, the unexpected. To protect your financial security, you have to trust someone who knows how to deal with change. Perhaps that's why investments with Merrill Lynch grew by $40 billion last year. Merrill Lynch, a tradition of trust.
It's a little spread country. It's Glade potpourri in a spray. It's country wildflowers with a little bit of garden fruit and spice.
Glade potpourri in a spray.
It's a little spread country.
Glade captures potpourri in a spray, so you can enjoy the fragrances of fresh garden blossoms, spices, and fruits for any room in your home, anytime, instantly.
Glade potpourri spray. It's a little spread country.
Life without cholesterol. up the best things in life. What's left?
New Miracle Whip cholesterol-free dressing. Now you get all the taste of regular Miracle Whip and absolutely no cholesterol.
I do?
New Miracle Whip cholesterol-free. Now the best things in life are cholesterol-free.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And now see the light. Miracle Whip Light's cholesterol-free.
Sunday.
There was a contamination in our section.
They would do anything to keep her quiet.
They're trying to kill me.
Kurt Russell, Cher, and Meryl Streep. Silkwood, Sunday.
The Couple Report. Tragedy at Tiananmen. The untold story continues.
The movement is losing momentum. The students have returned to their campuses. There is talk of trying a hunger strike. The leaders are nervous. What if they can't get enough students to take part? They organize at Beijing University, often referred to as Beida.
They decided to put up a poster to announce that they were going to do a fast and to announce it over the broadcast system.
That night I had a list of people who would go on hunger strike. There were only 40 people. I felt very sorry because of the few people who signed up on the hunger strike list. So I came out and spoke at Beida.
200 volunteered from Shirda, from Normal University. 150 students from Beida volunteered, and when the students at Beida heard that the Shirda, the Normal University students, had already come up with this many students, Beida not doubled. The number shot up to 300. They wanted to have some special festival for this, some kind of special dinner.
The next day, many teachers gave us a feast before our hunger strike. Sorrow was deep in my heart, and I could not eat anything.
Some students even wrote wills, and many of them were crying at the dinner because they were very scared about what they were doing, but they were determined to do it.
At 12:30, we set out for the square.
The impact on the movement is incredible. Thousands flock to the square, not just students, but workers, ordinary citizens of Beijing, moved by the students' willingness to put their lives on the line. It is Deng Xiaoping's worst nightmare. Far from petering out, this movement is gathering steam. And within a day, on May 15th, Mikhail Gorbachev is due to arrive for an historic state visit.
As soon as Gorbachev stepped out of his airplane, it was clear that it would be impossible for the government to crack down on these students while he was there. You know, you have 1,000 foreign correspondents, you know, stumbling over each other in Beijing, and you're not going to have a big bloody incident in the middle of all this. And the students just exploited that, and they got, you know, it got bigger and bigger. Ultimately, there were about 2,000 or 3,000 hunger strikers.
Now, how did Deng respond to that?
He was furious and he was humiliated. Never before in 40 years had the People's Republic of China experienced such a public humiliation.
Then they started these processions, these demonstrations walking through the city, which paralyzed Beijing, of course, and the workers started coming out at the Bank of China, the flag carrier airlines. I mean, everyone was out there behind their, you know, their signs saying, you know, we support democracy.
At a state luncheon on the 16th, one of the Chinese television cameras catches a moment of apparent symbolic significance. Gorbachev handling his chopsticks with ease, while Deng, old and feeble, seems to have lost control. The embarrassed cameraman quickly pans away. Later that day, in the presence of Gorbachev, Zhao Ziyang, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, delivers a stunning piece of information.
At the time, didn't seem particularly dramatic to us, but for politically attuned Chinese people, they knew immediately what he meant. He said in several ways, several times, that Deng Xiaoping was still the paramount leader in China, and revealed a secret decision which had been taken in late 1987 to defer to Deng in all important matters, policy matters.
Now, there is an open split between Zhao Ziyang and Deng Xiaoping, and the students in the square know it. Officially, publicly, Deng has gone into semi-retirement, given up most of his power. Zhao was publicly washing his hands of everything that had gone wrong in China over the past couple of years. You can blame it all on Deng, he was saying.
And so the students lay there 13th, 14th, 15th, Ambulances came back and forth to bring people out because they were running out of fluids. Chinese students at a start have very little extra body fat the way we do. If we go on fasts for 3 and 4 days, it's not such a big deal, but Chinese students in general eat so little and are fairly emaciated anyway that just this kind of, this hunger strike really drained a lot of them very, very quickly. So the ambulances were coming back and forth and people started getting more and more upset. And that, in many ways, triggered the major marches of the 17th and the 18th of May, the largest marches, 1 million people a day, across the entire spectrum of Chinese society. Workers, intellectuals, journalists, party people came out carrying party banners.
There could no longer be any doubt in Deng Xiaoping's mind. There was an open coalition between the student movement in the square and Zhao Ziyang's allies in the leadership. Now, Deng can hardly wait for Gorbachev to leave town. On May 17th, Gorbachev flies to Shanghai. The next day, May 18th, Deng Xiaoping flies to Wuhan to meet with military commanders from around the country. Deng has already decided to declare martial law. But the military is not on board. Air Force and Navy commanders want nothing to do with the operation. Even in the Army, there are some supporters for Zhao Ziyang. There is sympathy for the students and little stomach for a military operation against Chinese civilians. But Deng argues that China is on the brink of chaos, and events in Beijing seem to bear him out. Inside the Great Hall of the People, that same day, what appears to be a conciliatory move by the government. They finally agreed to a dialogue, a meeting between Premier Li Peng and some of the student leaders. In keeping with student demands, the meeting is televised live. The impact on the Chinese people can only be imagined.
At the end of the meeting, Li Peng says, "Thank you for coming." And Wu Kai-si says, "We invited you, you didn't invite us, and you're late." And I think in many ways that brashness, that 20-year-old kid lecturing the premier of China, just shows how out of touch with reality they had gotten, the students have gotten.
Before dawn, May 19th, Zhao Ziyang, now a hero of the students, makes an unexpected appearance on the square. He had planned to come alone, but Li Peng learns of his intentions and joins him.
Li Peng was very rigid, very uncomfortable, didn't say anything, moved out of the bus very quickly. Zhao stayed quite a lot longer.
Zhao's motives in many ways, I think, was to tell the people that he was finished. He said, he came out and he said, "I've come too late," that it's over, that he can't do anything for them after this.
Zhao knows that Deng is ensuring the support of the military. There had already been a bitter exchange between the two men.
Well, what had gone down was that the hard line was the line now. Zhao had been essentially purged. I mean, he was out of the policy making. And there had been a leadership meeting in which Deng Xiaoping, espousing the hard line, said something like, "We have to deal firmly with these students. No matter what happens, I have 3 million soldiers behind me." And Zhao said something like, "But I have the people of China behind me." And Deng Xiaoping said, "Ni shema dou meiou," meaning you have nothing.
It is the 6th day of the hunger strike, May 19th. That evening, there's a leadership meeting in Beijing. Martial law is about to be declared. Zhao Ziyang is supposed to preside. He calls in sick. At midnight, martial law is declared without him. The students call off their hunger strike.
When they declared martial law, the leadership of the strike decided to call it off, because again, this meant to them that there was no opportunity for dialogue.
And on that night, people that were gathered around the square were waiting for the army to come in. We were told by continuous broadcast over the loudspeaker system from the students that they believed the army was moving in from various directions of the city.
Foreign diplomats have an even more alarming report. Troops have carried out the order to lock and load their weapons. That night, students in the square, diplomats in their embassies, are convinced that China, certainly Beijing, is on the brink of civil war. What happens during the next few hours is not precisely clear. It appears that the government and the military leaders are unable to reach a consensus. In the early hours of the 21st of May, the army stands down. Relief turns to euphoria, which in turn evolves into a misplaced sense of confidence. The residents of Beijing become intoxicated with people power. They envelop the army, read to the soldiers from newspapers, propagandize them by the unit, chat with them one-on-one. They tell the discomfited troops again and again that the people love the PLA and the People's Liberation Army loves the people. On May 23rd, 1 million people take to the streets of Beijing, demonstrating for democracy, demanding the removal of Prime Minister Li Peng. But Li Peng is not about to be removed. Deng Xiaoping is reported to be ill, and Li Peng is ready to move.
Long-term outlook holds the prospect of a leveling off, according to one.
The downward trend in savings by U.S. families continues to be a concern. Stocks closed sharply higher today in heavy trading. Analysts say uncertainty in the bond markets due to the recent volatility.
Investments, savings, insurance. Planning for your family's future requires finding the right balance. That's why so many people put their trust in Merrill Lynch. Merrill Lynch, a tradition of trust.
Bye, Mom. Don't be a stranger. She's gonna shine the floor with bright. Oh, well, guess I'll watch the soaps while it dries.
Surprise, baby. That's Fast Dry Bright. You'll be back on your no-wax floor before you know it.
What's this? But it's too soon. Ooh, pretty. That's me. Look how shiny. And already dry. Wish I was.
Turn on a bright shine with Fast Dry Bright.
It's a question of taste. If you had your pick of two cereals, both high-vitamin cereals, would you pick the one with just one kind of flake? Or Kellogg's Just Right with 3 different kinds of flakes, plus hearty rolled oats, plump raisins, sweet juicy dates, and crisp crunchy nuts? You're not alone. 2 out of 3 people pick Just Right over the leading high-vitamin cereal. In a world of high nutrition, Just Right is an answer to the question of taste. Kellogg's Just Right with fruit and nuts or crunchy fiber nuggets.
The Couple Report will continue in a moment.
Teen pregnancy. In New York City, a unique program is helping prevent it with a remarkable offer.
When you offer youngster options, it's the best contraception in the world.
Watch Peter Jennings on ABC's World News Tonight tomorrow.
This is a Como News Brief.
Good evening, I'm Dan Lewis. There were 5 tense hours in the heart of Everett tonight as police tried to capture a wanted fugitive. The man threatened to shoot anyone who came near. SWAT teams eventually stormed the house to get their man. Tonight at 11, we'll have the full report. A downtown Seattle fire sent 3 people to the hospital this evening, one of them in critical condition. And there's an effort tonight to put tough restrictions on pit bulls. More after this.
Abner, come here!
Where are you, Gladys?
Over at the Stevens, Abner!
I'm shocked, Gladys.
Their blinds are changing, Abner!
I'll call the papers, Gladys.
But so many, Abner, and so fast!
They probably just went to RADA, Gladys.
Come here, Abner, it's driving me crazy!
Well, that's gonna be one short trip.
Terry's family loves olive oil, but they could do without the excess fat and calories. So Terry, meet Pam. New olive oil Pam. It adds about 90% less fat and calories.
The NBA draft was held tonight at 11. We'll show you the Sonics picks, and we'll talk with one of their first rounders who's never even played college ball. Join us for Como News 4 at 11.
On the outskirts of Beijing, May 24th, parked on a country road off in the distance, a seemingly endless line of armored personnel carriers. At Beijing's railway station, soldiers are bivouacked aboard passenger trains on a siding, cooking their meals, washing their laundry. This is precisely what the president of China, Yang Shangkun, has ordered the military to do. The troops, President Yang tells his military commanders in a secret speech, should settle down and take a good rest. A news blackout is imposed on the troops, and they are subjected to intense political indoctrination. President Young indirectly confirms reports that there has been trouble in the ranks. If any troops do not obey orders, he says, I will punish them according to military law. In other words, they will be shot. May 26. Beijing is under martial law. The students have called off their hunger strike. The movement is starting to run out of steam. The students feel that they need a symbol, something that will stand for their movement, something that will afford them an honorable way to leave Tiananmen Square. They put it together here, at Beijing's Central Academy of the Arts.
They wanted a symbol, they knew they needed a symbol, and what in fact they did was this was the Arts Academy. They had a statue, a smaller statue that had been a working model of a Chinese man holding a flag or holding a pole of some kind with two hands. And they didn't have time to create a new statue, so they used that. They decided to use that as the model. What they decided to do was cut off the pole at the bottom and cut off the top and make that into the flame for the Statue of Liberty. It was a model of a man. They changed the face to a woman. And this in large part explains why the statue is a two-handed statue. They worked for 3 nights, non-stop, about 30 students building the statue.
While the art students are finishing the statue, one of the leaders of the student movement, Chai Ling, is buckling under the pressure. She approaches Phil Cunningham, a young American graduate student who's been translating for the BBC.
She came to me and said, I haven't talked to anyone in the press. I'm really nervous. I want to do an interview. It might be my last chance to talk. She gave what was basically her throwing in the towel. She said she was going to quit. It was too much pressure. It was getting very ugly. The government was going to do something terrible. So with her bodyguard, we went to an undisclosed location, which happened to be my friend's house. And we found a quiet place. We found an 8mm camera and a handy cam, and we started the interview.
These might be my last few words to be heard, because the situation has become very grim. My name is Chai Ling. I am 23 years old. Isn't it strange? My birthday is on April 15th, which is the day Hu Yaobang died.
I think she's a reluctant student leader who was thrust to the top of the Chinese student politics because she didn't have the same ego problems as a lot of the men involved.
Students are asking us what our next step is. I feel very sad. I want to tell them the next step is bloodshed. Only when the square is washed in blood will the people of the whole country wake up. But how can I say such words to my fellow students? I can't tell my fellow students that we should be prepared to use our lives and our blood to wake up the masses. The students will do that if they are asked. But they are still children.
Most of the interview was in tears, and she said after this interview she was going to disappear officially. We actually tried to give her a change of outfit because she's fairly well recognized. We tried to dress her up in something different, a little more Hong Kong, a little more overseas. We went to the square and she said she wanted to meet her husband and find out if he was going with her or not, and there seemed to be some disagreement there as whether they were going to flee together or not. We chose what we thought would be a anonymous rendezvous point, which ironically is a Kentucky Fried Chicken on the southern face of Tiananmen Square. We found him, and he was in charge of finances for the movement. And I said, you know, Chai Ling wants to see you right now. She's waiting at such and such a location, which was Kentucky Fried Chicken. And he went there, and he couldn't find her. We went there on foot. He had already come back to the square. She had panicked and left. She then made one last trip to Tiananmen Square, found her husband, and he says, what are you panicking for? What are you worrying about? Nothing's wrong. Nothing's going to happen today. Everything's all right. And that was that. And so what we had thought would be her last interview and a very narrow escape, she was going to go to the train station on that particular day. Turned out not to be.
Seen now, looking back, there is an inevitable quality to what happened next. But at the time, the plan was still to leave the goddess of democracy behind, to pull the demonstrators out of Tiananmen once the statue was unveiled.
They worked for 3 nights, non-stop, about 30 students building the statue.
Perhaps the Chinese authorities had an even keener appreciation of the statue's symbolic impact than the students did.
They, at first, had decided to get a truck and bring it to the square in a truck, but they got a phone call from the Public Security Bureau that warned them that if anyone drove that truck, he would lose his license. So they decided that they didn't want to risk any individual losing their license. So they went out on the street and got 6 pedicabs, 3-wheel trucks, and broke the statue down into 4 pieces and piled it up on that. And a whole group of them who had been involved in building it, and students from the school, stood around it and wheeled it to the square. They got to the square about 10:30 that night, on the night of the 29th, and 50,000 people were standing waiting for them to protect the statue.
The moment for Chai Ling to escape had come and passed.
She was calm again, she was confident. In her words, she was drafted to be the leader of the student movement against her will. I mean, she had really had it. She was afraid. She says, you know, I'm only a person, I want to live. I want to live too. And then she was basically unanimously declared and asked to be the commander-in-chief of Tiananmen Square. And so she then said that to turn down the people who she had stood by so long would be a great disservice, and she decided to stay through to the bitter end.
So this is 10:30 at night, and they announced that the next morning at noon, they were going to unveil the statue.
Today, here in the People's Square, we unveil a statue. She is the goddess of democracy. We dedicate her to the hunger strikers.
And here they could have left. There would almost certainly still have been reprisals against student leaders, but on this afternoon of May 30th, there had still been no deaths.
This is very typical of Chai Ling and typical of the whole student movement. That to talk with the leaders wasn't enough. They had to have a vote. And this was, you know, democracy in action. And most of the students voted to leave the square, but there was a portion who voted not to leave, and they didn't leave. And the story is that they were the people who were crushed by the tanks.
They had agreed weeks before, in a curious variation on democracy, to be bound by the rule of the minority. The minority wanted to stay.
Personally speaking, I want to persist to the very end. We are waiting for the government to begin a bloodbath. But I also believe a big revolution is imminent. We should also preserve some revolutionary seeds for the next time around. I am not interested in politics, but next time I'll step forward again, if I am still alive.
It's an amazing line of them, but I mean, at this point, it's nothing sinister. I mean, these guys look like they're out, jogging down the street.
Today, the president sent Congress a $441 billion education. Leading educators have expressed concern about the cost of a college education.
Concern about long-term inflationary trends was debated today by the latest university to raise tuition for the upcoming year.
Planning, investing, results. At Merrill Lynch, we're helping parents find ways to finance their children's education. Today, millions of dollars are at work to give the next generation a mind of its own. Merrill Lynch, a tradition of trust.
Life without cholesterol. I mean, how much lettuce can one man endure? Give up the best things in life. What's left?
New Miracle Whip cholesterol-free dressing. Same tangy zip as Miracle Whip and absolutely no cholesterol. So you get all the taste and none of the cholesterol.
I do?
New Miracle Whip cholesterol-free. Now the best things in life are cholesterol-free.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
An important message from Ford Motor Company. For the 9th year in a row, owners of Fords, Mercurys, and Lincolns have reported fewer problems on average than owners of any other cars and trucks designed and built in North America. At Ford, quality is job one.
I'm going to serve the Pomeroys the same pate I had left over from the Phillips. Imagine if they ever found out. But thanks to my Ziploc storage bags, they'll never know.
Put your trust in a Ziploc bag.
Employment rose a fraction of a percentage point last month. The Labor Department announced an oil price increase to take effect.
Consumer price index jumped 0.6%.
Fear of inflation caused jitters in the financial market.
Volatility, uncertainty, the unknown. Helping people enjoy their retirement requires an understanding of their dreams. At Merrill Lynch, we pride ourselves on getting to know you, one by one. Merrill Lynch, a tradition of trust.
From Batman boxer shorts to Ghostbusters slime, tomorrow the merchandising madness of today's movies. Also, Steve Allen will be here on Good Morning America tomorrow.
June 5th. Given the events of the previous night, it was a magnificent, if suicidal, act of rage and courage. Wang Weilin, a student, was hustled away by friends but then arrested within hours. There is no supporting evidence for reports that he's been executed, but his may have been one of the last acts of free expression in Beijing for the time being. If you would understand the meaning of George Orwell's dark vision of life under a totalitarian regime, study China these last few weeks. There are no more students or peaceful demonstrators, only thugs, ruffians, and counter-revolutionaries, an important term in the Marxist-Leninist dictionary, in that counter-revolutionaries are, by definition, sponsored and controlled by foreign elements. Evidence? There is evidence. The tents from Hong Kong. Large sums of money raised at a concert rally in Hong Kong. Surveillance cameras have caught Taiwanese spies at work among the demonstrators. There and there. And here are their code books. And of course, the United States, with its Voice of America broadcasts, its symbols and slogans. And worst of all, its willingness to grant refuge at the U.S. Embassy in Beijing to the astrophysicist and dissident, now arch-counter-revolutionary, Feng Lizhe. Is it embarrassing that those who've been arrested show signs of having been beaten? On the contrary, it is intended to inspire fear. And so, too, we begin to hear of executions in Shanghai, in central China, in Beijing. And perhaps inadvertently, Chinese television reveals not only the scope of the threat to the government in Beijing, but how widespread the demonstrations really were. Scenes of violence and defiance from all over the country. As for the massacre at Tiananmen, the Chinese authorities seize on a loophole. And strictly speaking, they are right. Most of the killings that night happened on what some Chinese now call Blood Road, 2 or 3 miles west of the square, in front of the Beijing Hotel, a few hundred yards east of the square. People were killed at Tiananmen, there is no question about that, but if by massacres you mean huge numbers, those occurred outside the square. The only specific references to casualties single out the martyrs from the People's Liberation Army. Grotesque sequences of their charred bodies, sympathetic visits to their wounded comrades are shown again and again. Whoever rules China these days needs the support of the PLA. They are beloved. They are cherished by young and old, far and wide. You have only to watch Chinese television. If, during the Cultural Revolution, things were normal in China, then China is back to normal. Only these days, it is the thoughts of Deng Xiaoping, his speeches, his observations, that must be studied throughout the nation. And everything is wonderful. Bright prospects for the cotton harvest in Hebei. Pig production is up in Yangzhou. And in Wuhan, where train service workers are following Deng Xiaoping's thoughts, passenger service has returned to normal. What happened in China in April and May? Whatever the government says happened. We know that there are dissenting voices in China, but these days, they dare not speak. Over this past weekend, Zhao Ziyan, whom we have not seen since his tearful farewell to the students on the 19th of May, Zhao was stripped of all his posts in the government and the Communist Party. Li Peng, speaking in behalf of the party, said that Zhao's problems are still being investigated. In other words, there will be more. Chai Ling is still in hiding. You should know that we did not conceal her features because she is already well known to and photographed by the Chinese authorities, and because she told Phil Cunningham not once, but 5 times, that she wanted her thoughts on democracy to be seen and heard in the West.
I feel that in China, this will be a very long, slow process. Maybe it will take 60 or 70 years. But I hope there will be a day when all of us can safely work and enjoy the benefits of our labor.
Or, as another Chinese student put it,
we hold this truth to be self-evident that all man is created equal.
The finance ministers of the 7 most prosperous Western nations.
The world has become a global marketplace. Last year, Merrill Lynch helped corporations and governments raise $230 billion for building industries and creating opportunities. We're proud to have inspired that much trust. Merrill Lynch, a tradition of trust.
For many generations, oat bran has been a natural part of their breakfast. A breakfast now known as Kellogg's Mueslix. Oats and wheat ripened in their own sweet time. Fruit and nuts warmed by the summer sun. How fortunate we've rediscovered what they knew all along. Kellogg's Mueslix with oat bran. What breakfast was meant to be.
Want tough stains out?
Well, shout it out, baby, now. Shout it out, baby. Squeeze lemon, shout. Lemon power shout.
Nothing cleans better than a squeeze of lemon power shout.
You know it works so good.
Shout with the cleaning power of lemon penetrates and breaks up tough stains to wash them clean away.
Just like your new shout would.
Want tough stains out? Squeeze lemon shout.
Squeeze that shout.
Later on Nightline, ABC News people who have been covering the China story join Ted Koppel with their personal recollections and talk about China as it is today.
The Koppel Report has been brought to you by Shout. Want tough stains out? Squeeze lemon power shout. And Merrill Lynch, a financial firm built on a tradition of trust.
Thirty-something will return next week at its regular time.
Are your kids physically fit? This is Rob Weller, and Wednesday on Home, skater Peggy Fleming shares her tips with special guest host Will Schreiner. Plus, learn how to avoid a credit card crisis Wednesday.
The Koppel Report. Tragedy at Tiananmen, the untold story, is a presentation of Koppel Communications Incorporated in association with ABC News.
This is ABC.
Coming up next on Como News 4 at 11, the end to a tense standoff in Everett with the dramatic capture of a man who held police at bay for hours.
Fire breaks out at a high-rise apartment in downtown Seattle. Several people are hurt.
The crackdown on cocaine and a record-breaking bust in our state.
And we'll hear from the Sonics high school draft pick.
Como News 4 is next.
Henry Weinhardt's Private Reserve.
People all around the country are asking for a special premium beer.
Henry Weinhardt.
But no one